Welcome to the Seniors Flourish Podcast, where it's all about helping occupational therapy practitioners disrupt the norm by throwing away the rainbow art and being the best you can be when working with older adults.
You know when you have those patients that don't want to put up handrails on the stairs or outside the house because they're afraid it'll make the house look ugly or make the patient look, quote, old? Well, I found these handrails from Promenaid that are super stylish, come in all sorts of finishes and colors to match any type of house. I like that they're super adjustable and you can literally put them anywhere, even those funky corners where the patient needs something but nothing ever quite fits. They ship quick and be installed right away, so we can adapt the home to what our patient needs fast, which is our number one priority. Check them out at Promenaid.com, Promenaid.com. Welcome, everyone, to the Seniors Flourish Podcast. My name is Mandy Chamberlain. I'm an occupational therapist, and we like to chat about everything occupational therapy and also working with the older adult. Today, my guest is Marla Pomperanz. She's an occupational therapist and an OTD candidate. And we're going to be talking about fall prevention, all the things that kind of go into it. Why do falls happen? What are some things that we should make sure that we're looking at in order to help our patients prevent falls? And then, make sure that we have some takeaways at the end so you can jump right in and put it into your clinical practice. So welcome, Marla. I'm happy you're here.
Thanks.
Well, let's just get started and jump right in and just talk about your OT journey. How did you get into OT and what are you doing today?
Okay. Well, OT is a second career. I was a teacher for a long time. So I went to school to become an elementary school teacher, and I taught 7th grade science for a really long time. And I love middle school kids because they're kind of like just big puppies. So they're really good.
Look at this gripper.
Right? But they have these bodies that are kind of, just too big to manage. They haven't grown into them. So they just kind of remind me of big puppies. But anyway, they're sweet and they're funny. And I love teaching 7th grade science. And then, so I was a teacher for a long time. And then it got to a point where, at least here in Arizona, and I'm sure it's nationwide, standards change and the classroom was becoming way more constrictive. And, being a science teacher, you see everybody. You have your honors kids, you have your inclusion kids, and everybody's this big heterogeneous mix. And so beautiful part and creative part about being a teacher is you get to take, and especially science, because it's so hands-on, you do these really cool labs and they just hit everybody, and you can, like OT grading, right? So you can grade any activity and it's just meaningful. But it was getting to a point here in Phoenix in Arizona where, you have your standards and they wanted all, in my district, all the classrooms needed to look the same. So I needed to be on page 146. And that day I was going to give us homework assignment number 1, 2, and 3. And not all my kids that wasn't appropriate for everybody. So I felt myself getting more frustrated with education. It was taking the joy out of what I love to do. And I felt like I wasn't being as effective. My hands were more and more tied. So, I did some soul searching. I switched districts to make sure that I was kind of making the right decision and it wasn't just one particular environment. And so I'm not a girl who generally, I think before I leap kind of thing. So
yeah.
I did that and then it wasn't any different. So I thought, well, what can I do that I love science and I love the creativity of teaching. So I thought about being a PA. I looked at PT. I looked at athletic training. And then I kind of stumbled across OT and I read the description. I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. And it just
That's so funny because I feel like,
no, go ahead. You just
no, I was just gonna say I feel like so many people just kind of stumble into it somehow. It just kind of oh, that looks like something I'd like to do.
Right? Because it's such a broad umbrella that there's so many pieces that can speak to an individual and there's so much flexibility in it. And I think that's appealing to a lot of people. I know it was for me. So I was halfway through my last year of teaching, kind of investigating the different path I was going to take. And I was pregnant. I got pregnant, which was awesome, with my daughter. And I was like, okay, well, I was working on my prereqs because all of those options required me to go back to school and do prereqs and stuff. And so I finished teaching, and then I became a scheduler for a place here called Desert Pain, and it has a huge aquatic portion of it. And there is this lady, Annette Jameson, and she's an amazing occupational therapist. And I kind of became her tech, but yet the scheduler for the office too, when I was very, very pregnant. And I just kind of fell in love with OT. And it had a lot to do with Lynette. She's amazing. And anyway, so then I had my daughter, and then she was 9 months old. I went to OT school. And I did it part-time.
Oh my gosh.
I know, right?
I know. We were talking about this earlier. I'm just like, oh my gosh, any of you moms, parents that have kids and going to OT school, like, you are more resilient than I am. That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yes, it is. It's a huge balance. And it's, luckily I was able to do it part-time because I went to AT still. I started full-time and I was like, no, I'll never see my daughter. And we're kind enough to kind of just split it into 3 years instead of 2. And I didn't want to miss her growing up. That was, she's my number one in my life. And so that's kind of how I got into OT school. And then while I was in OT school, I'm kind of a sandwich generation kid. Raising my daughter and my mom was aging at the same time. So halfway through school, my mom had a fall. And she broke the femoral neck, and she had to have a partial hip. And I think I wasn't, I was in school, so you think I was prepared, but I totally wasn't prepared because really the fall was a manifestation of things that were underlying. And so, she had a fall. Next thing I know, she's like in acute renal failure. And then she needs a transfusion. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's like a whirlwind. And I think that was it. I mean, as soon as we got through that, I was like, this can't happen to anyone else. What do I do? Tell me. And that's how I did fall prevention.
Wow. And then after school, did you start working with older adults specifically? I mean, or just like in those type of settings, or did you kind of do a little bit of everything?
Well, I think, in school you do your clinical rotations, and I did one at a sensory integration clinic, and I found that when I came home, I was looking at my daughter too close. You know what I mean?
Over analytical.
I'm giving her a bath and I'm like, what happened? Can you write yourself? Not okay.
I think we all do that. Right. Isn't that funny? You go to the airport and you're like, oh, they must have had a hip replacement or.
So I'm like, I'm working with children who obviously need services. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm learning and it's awesome. But then I'm going home and I'm looking at this kid too closely and I'm trying to, I'm not saying anything and trying to make her feel uncomfortable. But on the inside, I'm processing. I'm like, I can't. So, and I'd worked with kids for a long time. And, when I saw this with my mom, I just was, I'm going to say that this sounds, there was a certain level of what bothered me was there was a certain level of, well, you're an older adult, you've lived your life. So you're not going to get the attention and the care to the same degree as somebody who, like it was almost like you were dismissed. Oh, you fall. Okay, well, you're supposed to have a fall. No, that's not true.
Yeah. That's
irritates me.
And that's the stuff. Yeah. And that's the stuff that kind of fuels the fire, right? Like it kind of creates that passion because there's certain things that is actually that's actually kind of first of all, just kind of actually ageism. They're, being older doesn't mean you're going to just start falling, or doesn't mean that you're going to all get depression, or it doesn't all mean like there's patients and people that need to be advocated for. And that's part of that's why I love working with older adults, because I feel like also they need some of them need a voice and they need someone to advocate for them. And I feel like we are the perfect profession for that.
Yes.
And so you became interested in fall prevention through your experience with your mom.
Yeah. And then AT still has this cool program. Well, they partner with Matter of Balance. Matter of Balance.
Okay.
It's from Maine Health, and it's obviously out of Maine. And it's a fall prevention program. It's a cognitive base, but there's exercises in it. It's a comprehensive program, and it's fantastic. And the opportunity for a student to participate and become a coach, and then you go out to an assisted living and you run this 8-week, twice a week program, and it's fantastic. And I just loved it. Somebody in my cohort and I were paired up, and we went out and we ran this program, and it was amazing. And I think what it was is that it's voluntary. And so when you go, that makes the difference. It's purposeful. It's meaningful. It was like the quintessential OT experience. But if you pair that with my mom and all of those kinds of things kind of click together, and the ageism and all of those kinds of things, it just was a perfect storm.
Yeah. So like with that program, I mean, there's a lot of like different like quote balance program, community programs out there. I mean, the one I'm familiar with is called N-Balance, but it's not like OT specific by any means. And it's very balance, community based, and it does a good job for what it does. And it's like the same type of thing. It's a program where community members can come and they can participate and that kind of thing. But with the Matter of Balance, what is the cognitive aspect of that?
Well, the cognitive piece of, of Matter of Balance is there's that reframing. There's that reframing of fears of falling. So, and I kind of, when I developed my own program for my doctoral program, it was those same kind of principles. So here's what I find. I find like we don't want to talk about the white elephant in the room. We kind of go, oh, well, you have a history of falls. Well, let me show you how to prevent a fall. But then we don't say, oh, you have a history of falls, or, how do you feel about that? What's your level of self-efficacy? So Matter of Balance is the piece that I think makes it fantastic and unique, is that it addresses that self-efficacy. It says, oh, you have a fear of falling? Well, let's reframe that and put it in realistic terms. And literally take a flip chart and you say, why are you nervous? Okay, well, let's problem solve it. And it flips it so that the person takes control of their fear and says, well, if I'm nervous to go to a ball game because I don't want to get trampled, and so I just don't go to a ball game, then you kind of problem solve and say, well, if you love to go to a ball game and you're missing that chunk of your life, what can you do to actually go to a ball game? Well, you can get there.
Yeah.
You can wait for everybody to leave and not get trampled. You can go with a friend, somebody to hook arms with them, and it just kind of, it puts the person in control of the fear instead of the fear in control of the person.
Oh, that's a good frame. I mean, like like a framework.
Right? We should make a t-shirt.
I like that. Well, you might. Yes. And if you do, I might get it. So keep me in mind if you decide to develop
I'll
one.
Send you some visual checks, royalties.
Yeah, there we go. My 5 cents for every shirt sold. Okay, so you were just talking about that in addition, you are developing a fall prevention kind of program for your OTD. Want to talk about that a little bit and what you're finding with that?
Being like with Matter of Balance, and that it's a community-based program, through the OTD, you kind of pick your passion, which obviously for me is falls. And then you kind of go through the literature and you say, well, where's the gap? And so when I did that, I found that there's a gap in education. And it is that subacute setting, which is the rehab setting, which is the setting I generally work in. And so my brain started to kind of go, well, why don't we talk about fall prevention versus what we put in a tertiary way, what we put in our sessions, but we don't do a formal hey, we're going to run this class, not just once or whenever we have participants, but like an everyday offering. and different topics in fall prevention. So there was a gap there. And so I created a cognitive-based program, not exercise-based, mind you. The program I designed was to complement what you already do in OT and PT, because you're going to be exhausted because you've been in OT and PT all day, right? Yeah. A rehab is a place to get rest. Right. So I'm not going to do more exercises with you, but I am going to do that cognitive reframing, and I am going to give you tools to go home and implement, like, directly. So that's what I did. I created this program. I call it Empower. I'm working on, refining things, because you run a pilot study and you see where you have to go back and modify. But, we do awesome stuff. Like, we create floor plans of your house with movable furniture, and we actually set it up and move through it. And we talk about, how removing those physical barriers. And we talk about the importance of eye exams, and we do exercises in little activities that say, and I alter the lighting and read the same thing. Now try it this way. Now try it that way. And it's very hands-on, and it got a really positive response. But, yeah. So, I want to, the name of the program is Empower, purposefully. I want you to be in control. Shouldn't make your life fearful. You need to get that self-efficacy and just crush it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think it also kind of adds, I can see how, obviously I've never participated in it or I've, worked with it, but I just think of it from patients I've worked with in the past. I could kind of see that a little bit as more of I always call it buy-in, which might not be the right term, but sometimes you educate and you feel like you're educating patients, and they're just looking like, and you don't have that. I mean, you get the feedback, or you ask why, and you try to use maybe some, interviewing type of skills, and you do some of those types of things. But if you can put that into their court and obviously try to be their self-directed and talk about the barriers of each of the things that they may not be excited about doing, like moving furniture, like, why don't you want to move furniture, or whatever that may be. I think that would empower the patient and really just make it a win-win for everyone. It's kind of what I'm thinking.
When they go home, I can't go home with you. I would love to go home, but I can't go home with you because, I pretty much want to take everybody home, because everybody so flipping cute. I just want to take everyone home. Put them in my pocket. I'm going to start a university of cute people and just take everybody home. But I would love to go home with you and just be like, let me do the grunt work and set it up the way you want to. And please just, dear God, don't fall. So the only thing I know is to give people control,
Yeah. Do you know any of the statistics of how many falls are a year?
Too many,
or
but yes,
what I mean?
Unfortunately,
too many. Yeah, I know.
I was part of the whole background and stuff when you write your gigantic paper, which is just amazing. That I'm usually a girl of few written words, and I have this giant paper, and I look at it and go, "Yikes!" But
you created it.
How did that happen? I guess a sentence at a time. But CDC's got all of these stats, and it was 2.8 million cases of falls were treated in emergency departments, and out of that, 800,000 were seniors who were hospitalized for fall, issues. And I'm looking at my notes, 27,000 fall deaths a year.
It's a lot, actually.
So
deaths directly.
Yes. And here's interesting in my research and in the stats and what you find out there. Do you know that most people feel like it's like you're supposed to fall? They're like, oh, well, I'm getting older. My balance is terrible, so I'm going to fall. That is absolutely not true. 66% of people never have a fall. But
yeah, it's not. That's what I was talking about. The whole
but that, yes, you always got to put your big butt in it. But the butt of it is that if people don't fall, they still know somebody who falls, and that's what freaks people out, and that's what starts the spiral of oh, well, now I have to be careful. Oh, and I can't do this anymore. And that leads to that inactivity and that lack of participation in life and that spiral where everything kind of does go downhill because you're not as active, you're not as participatory. So we actually find that it's not that people have experienced a fall more than they have a fear of falling because they know somebody who has fallen. And so they curtail their own activities. And that's what eventually will lead to a fall.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've all heard those stories. They'll be like, oh, my neighbor did this or this happened. And that's exactly right. Then they quit going out or they quit doing X, Y, and Z. And then they decrease their, social participation. And then, it's just like you said, it's just a whirlwind that it just escalates. So what are some of the biggest factors?
No, there was one more thing that I thought was super interesting when I came across this one study. Obviously, it was in a nursing journal, and all the OTs out there probably already know this, but there is so many amazing articles in nursing journals that OTs, we generally don't write a lot. But when you look for research and you ever kind of go out there and go, wow, nursing and OT, much hand in hand. There are some fantastic things, but there was this article that I read. It was talking about falls, and it's saying that if an older adult experiences a fall in the community, and breaks a hip, and goes into the hospital, and then their chances of going home is like 67% of going back to their original setting and going home and picking up their lives. 67% if you experience a fall in the community and break a hip. Okay. If you experience a fall in an acute or subacute setting and it results in a hip fracture, your chances of going home, 14%. Right? Oh, that's really insane.
14%. Did they go into
so
why
here are the factors that contribute, because you had asked me a question and it said, why do people fall? So in an acute or subacute setting, and then versus home, we'll do if you want, we could do the subacute setting first. Subacute or acute setting, if there's going to be a fall in a hospital type setting, it's due to, there's a variety of reasons, but the most substantial are there's tubing. It's an unfamiliar setting. The lighting, there's not a whole lot of natural light, so you don't know if it's daytime or it's nighttime. Not a lot of hospitals have like big giant windows. Your circadian rhythms are all wonky. You're on med. You've already had some kind of trauma, so your self-efficacy is down. And so all of those things actually increase your chance of having a fall in that kind of setting, which is why you always have to have someone with you. Always. A friend, a neighbor, always have to have an advocate with you in a hospital. I'm a big proponent of that because hospitals change. And as careful as they are and as fantastically as they're run and set up for that patient, it's a whirlwind. So anyway, that answers that question for you.
Well, and it's just something actually, something that we kind of know, but it's actually a really good reminder that, that those are things to kind of pay attention to when patients are in the hospital. Because it's like those things like, we know that, but also patients are like, I'll be fine, or I can get up, or, all those patients that will get up on their own to go to the bathroom or something like that. And you see them and they're like pulling their oxygen cord and it's only like 5 feet long. And they're like, you're like, well, and then you have like terrible fluorescent lighting, and then you have like floors that have no contrast, and then they have glasses and they didn't really bring them with, and so they are not wearing them because they had to fall at home, and no one thought to bring the glasses while they're, it's just like there's all these things that also the patient doesn't realize impacts them as well, and so even maybe just to educate them on some of those things, but gosh. It is the worst when they fall. I shouldn't say the worst, but it's terrible when they fall in the hospital because you feel like there's so many professionals around that can help, and then they fall and you're like, oh man. Because most of the time it's when they're on their own.
I'm going to preach into the choir, and yes.
Yes. Okay, so what are some of the other factors in
So
like
most
different
people,
other settings?
why most people fall at home is kind of, well, there's urinary incontinence is one of the biggest contributors to a fall. Yes.
Huge.
And so there's that comes in a twofold package where there's that orthostatic hypotension, when you go from to a stand and not waiting, but then why would you wait when you have to go to the bathroom? So you have that urinary incontinence coupled with orthostatic hypotension. How long you've been sitting, those muscles might need a little bit of stretch and movement and all those things even before you take your first step. So all of those things contribute to a fall. But we know that also, it's kind of that other double-edged sword of people don't want to drink water. They don't want to run to the bathroom. You get dehydrated. And then when you're dehydrated, you're weaker. And so when you're weaker, you're more likely to fall, or you don't drink enough and you get a urinary tract infection. And then you have that cognitive cloudiness, and then that contributes to a fall. So it's really hard to be a person, Mandy. It's really, really hard.
It's hard to function and live. No, I know. And it's also hard sometimes to convince people of that because, also, and I've talked about this in other episodes, what our role is, even just as a generalist OT, and how we should be addressing urinary incontinence. So if you haven't checked out that episode, that is a really, really good jam-packed episode as well. But because that's the exact same thing. People don't drink enough water. They get dehydrated or because they don't want to have to go to the bathroom because they're incontinent. And then they rush because they may have urge incontinence. And then they're, have all these other factors going on, lighting or throw rugs or all those things that you think about, right? And they're rushing. Yeah, glasses, and they're rushing, and maybe they don't even have very good reaction time. There's so many things, or balance, and they don't have the proper shoes. They're not wearing them because it's just like this whirlwind. And that's why, obviously I'm biased because we're occupational therapy practitioners, but that's why our role is so unique because we can look at the person, the environment, all the, what their occupations need to be during the day and what they need to accomplish, and try to look at them more holistically and address some of those things. But it's hard being a person. You're right.
So we're like rock stars at that person, that PEO model, that person environment model. And that's we are perfectly suited to be the advocacy for fall prevention. We really are. And I think the key is really empowering the person sitting in front of you. The person is capable. And that goes also back to that ageism thing. That is a functioning, capable person. They've been doing this for however many years. They can hear that weird thing that infuriates me. That's they're still capable. We give somebody a chance. So it comes from the right place. I know people get overprotective and caring, and it's coming from the right place. Your heart's in the right place, but you really need to empower that person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and like you were saying about the PEO model, the person, environment, occupation model, if you're out of like academia, you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly right. But you kind of don't sit and think, I'm going to use the PEO model today. But
say
that being said,
moho today. Done. Yeah, I did.
Dominated that. Exactly. But that's exactly what we're doing is specifically when you're really lurking. Obviously, we're going to do this in if you work in lots of different settings, but I think this model is specific for if you're specifically amazing in home health, because you're really looking at, and you can specifically problem solve. Because sometimes you go through, you're like, let's talk about your routines and let's talk about your, daily habits.
Yes.
They leave so much out. And then when you are in home health and then you're like, hey, you actually do this. They're like, oh yeah, I have to get my dog out, they have to go to the bathroom at this time, and the male person actually comes at 11 in the morning. And then and you're like, okay. And you can really see how that environment and their daily occupations affect everything. So, using a model like the PEO model, I mean, especially for something like fall prevention, I mean, gosh, it looks at everything. Yeah. So I was kind of poking through, some of that. So some of the things, that you would be looking at is, like you were saying, empowering the patient, problem solving, look at the roles, give them that sense of control, risk-taking behaviors, home modification, environmental redesign, assess and practice safe mobility strategies, incorporate exercise and activity into daily life and routine. So those are some really, obviously those are all things that we know, right? But I think it's really important to think about, and are we addressing all of them when we're talking about fall prevention?
It was kind of interesting. So when you're like, when I was running this Empower program, we did this, there was a part of it where we did this exercise or activity where I said, okay, I want you to think about your day today in rehab. How many times did you go from sitting in the wheelchair to standing, walking? Basically, how many sit to stands did you do to a day for the day, right? And so in that kind of setting, we average every time the program we're run, we average somewhere between 10 and 12 sit to stands a day. Okay. And then we take the same activity and I said, okay, now I want you to walk me through your daily life. What do you do? Well, I get up in the morning and then I walk to the bathroom. Well, let's see, sit to stand 1, sit to stand 2. And so we went through the whole day and we averaged somewhere between 60 and 80 sit to stands a day.
Yeah.
So when we talk about incorporating exercises and into daily activities and routines, I don't think people realize the huge difference between being in a rehab setting and discharging somebody home, and the activity demands and the amount of increase between one and the other. And so there's a lot more physical activity happening at home than a person might really understand until you sit down and you write it out. Right?
Yeah, that's a really good exercise.
Like, as a home health practitioner, we give out exercises and you need to do this and you need to do that. But, even if we're just encouraging people to continue to do more sit to stands through the day, go check your mail, go do this, go do that activity. It doesn't have to be like you should join a gym and you should take your TheraBand and do 20 of these and use a can of soup and pull it above your head and, whatever, you know what I mean? Take a gallon of tricep curls.
Exactly. No, exactly.
It doesn't have to be as formal. Yeah.
It's much more functional and occupation based anyway. Like, it's things that they can easily do because, gosh, some people just don't want to do that. And so then, we shouldn't be making them do something. Well, I don't know. That's a whole nother topic.
Well, there's much more
like trying to get into that.
It's natural.
But how
it's like, well, like, that NDT outcomes. Approach to doing any kind of TheraX. The more NDT that you do, the more diagonal natural movements you do, the more like the brain is like, oh yeah, I totally know how to do this. But when we do these stilted weirdness, people are like, what do I do? And so the same thing.
All right.
Anyway.
Yeah. It is the same thing. Well, and it's very, exercise typically, not always, and I don't want to but it's very single plane. Like, we don't move in single plane movements typically. We're dynamic. And so when you can incorporate occupation and or functional activities into any kind of increase of activity, exercise is amazing. So how do you recommend or what is the most common ways that we can assess fall risk?
Fall, when we talk about a formal assessment of a fall risk, there's the traditional assessment tools. And I would think the most one that I see in research and going through more journal articles than any human being should ever have to read is the TUG, the timed up and go. So that seems to be the gold standard of fall risk assessment tools. I mean, there's the Berg and the Tonettis, and there's there are some pretty complex tools out there, but usually the go-to is the tug. And then, so I think that's the most common screen that's used for fall prevention. But honestly, an interview, you just ask the person.
I think the interview is such an important
if you get a chart and you're doing a chart review, you're doing a chart review or whatever, and you see that the person has had a history of a fall, and or the person is there because they have a fall, or the person is hard of hearing. There is such a huge connection between hearing and balance and falls. It's insane. So even as a practitioner, which would pretty much apply to the majority of people that we see, when you're doing your OT eval, you can just say, do you have any concerns about a fall? What are your feelings? And usually just a nice open-ended question. And if you get, oh, well, I've never fallen, but my neighbor Susie fell the other day and she was taking out her trash and it was so big and unwielding and she just went down and it just makes me nervous. And that's like the perfect opening. Really, why does that make you nervous? Let's, and then that can totally work right into a treatment or an intervention. So
that's good verbiage. Verbiage? Yeah, verbiage. Like people verbiage. My husband's English, and so sometimes I'm like, is that an American word? Did I just, or is that an English word? Like, I don't know some days. But no, I think using the correct terminology and the correct words, open-ended questions to your patients, you're just opening the door, and they're the ones that are able to direct and give you. They give you way more information than you actually think you're getting. That's our job.
We are not. My job is to facilitate change.
Yeah.
My job is to empower you and facilitate change. My job is not to make you dependent upon me. My job is to say, you know what? It was awesome to work with you. Go back home. I want you to go out there and just be a rock star. And next time I see you, it's at Trader Joe's. I feel like as a therapist, that's my best thing that I can do for you.
That's what we want. And that's what they want. And it's like all about trying to achieve their goals, obviously, but it's like really, just want the best for them. And it's really hard because it's just hard being human.
I said that all the time in the classroom. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have no idea how beautiful you all are sitting in front of me and what had to happen to make you as perfect as you are. And it is so hard to be a human being.
Yeah. I know. And, I think even with just like falls and just being able to start those conversations and also just kind of know your resources. Like, okay, maybe you don't have a matter of balance program in your community, but like, what are the balance type programs that are available? So like maybe if you have somebody that is fearful and they're not going to be staying at home and you feel like they'd be a good candidate, because honestly, it's one of those things like I've found, where you're like, I think, have you ever thought about doing a community-based or like, a group balance class? Or because there's a lot of them out there, tons of like gyms and community centers, senior centers, and there's a lot out there and people are hesitant. But a lot of times once they get into it, it becomes like a social club.
And there's like Tai Chi and chair yoga and there's some amazing things out there. And like, senior sneakers, silver sneakers, totally free. I'm going to totally rock that when I'm 65. I'll be like, done. Woo! Water.
Where do I find Oh, I know. I'm going to be that person when I think part of it is we're so, professionally like ingrained to, like prevention. And plus I see that as such a, also like there's a lot of social isolation in older adults. And I feel like it's such a neat way to kind of like get into a group situation where you're feeling good and you're moving your body and it helps with, exercise and endorphins and cognitive stimulation and, strength and balance and all those things that we know of, but also that social connectivity, even if that's the only time that they get out and do it with people, it's such an important factor. And I've just had such good feedback of once you get over the barrier, some people will jump right in. Some people will never do it. And those people that are on the fence, I'm like, oh, just give it a shot. Try one or two classes. And if you hate it, that's up to you. But I always kind of like try to nudge a little bit. And most of the time they really enjoy it. Like, even if it's just for the social aspect, because a lot of those programs, I mean, even if they're not run by, a therapist or a, OTPT assistant or anything like that, if they're just like personal trainers or like community trainers or whatever it may be, they're taught to kind of be able to adapt it. And I think that's part of the thing they get a little, my feedback is that they get a little, they're like, well, what if I can't do it? And I'm like, they're there to help you and like make it successful for you. And so those are the things that I think is really, so just, I guess, encourage people to know your resources, look what's out in the communities and have like a list, of what is available for your patients when they are not in the hospital or not in their setting or whatever setting you're in. Because I think there's such a neat way to work on fall prevention anyway. In addition, to traditional intervention,
I think fall prevention itself is just such a natural, movement. Anything that we do for functional movement is really working on preventing a fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some really good resources out there, like the National Council on Aging has amazing resources. And I don't know, excuse me, if you know this, but like, so sorry, there's just allergies for me. 411 is like the phone number for information, but almost every city has 211. Mm-hmm. Do you know 211? 211.
No.
You just Google 211.
See? I don't know.
And it is a list of all community resources. So anything from like violence to fall prevention to assistance with economic services. So 211, awesome resource. Mm-hmm. So, there are so many good resources out there, but that's one you should check it out. I learned about that when I became a master trainer for Matter of Balance. There was a lady there who was a social worker who was going through the same certification, and she was telling me all about it. And I went home and Googled it, and I was like, holy cow. Yeah, it's awesome.
Checked it out. Yeah. Well, those are the things that I'm like, how do these things exist that I feel like are such an important, those are the things that we should know. Yeah. But there's so many resources too. Like, it's like also just like know your resources, know your things in your community, even if it's a new community to you, like just like see what's out there and get the lists together. I'm always like, I'm going to say list, get my list, because I'm always like, I need to know, I need to get organized. I need to know what's going on. So then you can just flip through and you have it and you have it for you and you have it for your patients. Right. So what would you say are some key takeaways? Like if you're talking to OT practitioners out there, what are some key things that you would love for them to keep in mind when we're focusing on fall
first thing
prevention?
I would tell them is to take your Zyrtec in the morning, because obviously you'll sound like you don't.
That's a good tip, top tip.
Good grief. I think the biggest tip that I can give is that I think that occupational therapists, OTs and OTAs and everybody, basically, you are that key. You are that link. That person is sitting in front of you for a reason. They need help. They need something from you. And you're the expert. You're the facilitator. And don't be afraid to throw things against the wall and see if they stick. Just open up that conversation and then just listen. You might go into your session and be like, I'm going to do this, and this today, right? And you have this working model of interventions that I'm going to work towards this goal and blah, blah, blah. But you don't know what you're going to get when you walk in the door, but it's good to be prepared. But then when that's not what you see, slow down. Listen, what you do. I know everybody out there is just amazing. I can't reinvent the wheel. I just trust in what your gut says. Use that therapeutic use of self. Look at that person in front of you and go, okay, what can I bring to you today? What can I do for you? Because that's what you're there for. So that's what makes OT amazing. It's that holistic approach. So just kind of be true to it.
That's great. No, that's really good, obviously, advice, because I think when you go into OT, you feel like this is exactly what you're doing, but there's so many things that get in the way sometimes. You have all the logistics of your job and documentation and the politics of the facility and the pressures and the busyness of your own life. And I think sometimes it gets kind of pushed to the wayside. I mean, I'm not saying we all do this, but I guess what happens is it's really nice to hear that and focus and be like, yes, this is what we should be doing. And am I doing that? And then, because I mean, we're such a key and we can be such a resource. And that's why I love the profession. It's just like, I feel like we can empower our patients and help them live the best lives possible. So it's great. So thanks for sharing your fall prevention knowledge. Oh my gosh. And the other thing the funny thing is how I kind of met Marla in the first place is she owns and runs and dominates more Cowbelt, the custom gait belt website. And you go to AOTA and all these different things. So I got to meet you at AOTA this year in person. And it's just really nice. So I'd love for you to talk about, more Cowbelt obviously is talking about gait belts, which it helps with fall prevention as well. Yeah. So tell me just kind of quickly about how the heck did you get into custom gait belts? That's always, I love these stories.
OT school. I was on a clinical rotation at Health South, and there's 1,000,001 beige gait belts. And but every time it was time for me to actually use one, I couldn't find one. And then I never knew if it was clean or where it had been, and they're terrible looking. And I was like, this is clean. Well, I don't want to drop you, so I'm going to put that thing on. And there was a girl across the gym, another therapist across the gym, and she had taken a piece of yarn or something and tied it around her belt. And I could see it across the gym. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's genius. So I'm a student and I'm, kind of tucked that back there. And I went home, and my neighbor was a professional furniture upholsterer. And I said, hey, if I give you fabric, can you sew that on my gait belt? And he was like, oh, I've got this machine that sews through walls. Let's do it. I was like, okay, because the gait belt's thick. So you need like a hardcore, Viking $70 million machine to sew through it. So
right.
Yeah, no.
I'm not going to get your Walmart $5.
So that thing's going to be shredded after like 4 belts. So he sewed on fabric, and I wore it to work. And I walked in I took it out, and I was like, okay, well, let's see how this goes over. And everyone was like, holy cow, where did you get that? And I was like, I made it with my neighbor. I'll buy it off of you. Done. Okay. So, but I still had to, finish my rotation. I had another rotation. I had to sit for boards. So I took my boards on March 1st, and my board results weren't posted until like mid-April. So in that month or so, I started my Cowbelt. So more Cowbelt May 1st.
Wow.
And my mom, my mom was so cool. Amazingly brilliant, and she's the one who kind of walked me through the whole thing, and we started it together. And then sadly she passed she passed on June 19th, which was yesterday, but 6 years ago. So more Cowbelt was born May 1st. She passed June 19th. And so more Cowbelt is super personal, and it's kind of like the last thing my mom and I did together. So every time we sell a belt, $1 goes to a memorial fund in my mom's name for macular degeneration. So she was
that's amazing.
Thank you.
What an amazing story. and what an amazing like inspiration that you got to do that with her. That is really,
so when we sell a belt,
that's really neat.
Giraffe belt, I'm like, oh, that's
well,
my
Oh, well, and then like you do some funny t-shirts, and you guys are kind of expanding and doing all sorts of fun things.
It is
fun.
because
Our profession is
can
fun.
be really heavy, literally and figuratively. And so we try to bring a smile,
Yes.
make it a little bit, bring some levity in there when we can. So we have these funny therapy t-shirts now, and they really, hopefully they make people laugh, and
they are funny.
Oh my God.
They actually really are funny. I'm like, oh, I'm not that clever. I love clever people. Well, make sure everyone check them out. It's cowbelt.com, right? So everyone check it out. And thank you so much for sharing your passion of fall prevention and helping the rest of us kind of get on track with that and making sure that we're helping our patients the best we can. So I appreciate you taking the time today,
Marla. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's been super fun. And
it's been fun. So thanks everyone for listening, and until next time.
Do you feel like you're navigating the OT world without a map? Not feeling confident or competent in your day-to-day treatments and struggling to apply your knowledge clinically? Then be sure to check out the Seniors Flourish Learning Lab membership. It has all the treatment ideas, patient handouts, clinical resources, community support, and mentorship you need to succeed. Join today at seniorsflourish.com/learning lab.